Godwin Emefiele, former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, has pleaded not guilty to amended criminal charge filed against him by the federal government. Also, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has said he could return money to the UK if no asylum seekers are sent to his country under his deal with the government. This is The Conversation. I am Dakbo Adigboyi. Let's talk. On Thursday, the federal government amended the criminal charge it filed against the former CBN governor Godwin Emefiele. Now, the charge was previously 6 counts but was increased to 20 counts. The amended charge borders on criminal breach of trust, forgery, conspiracy to commit forgery, procurement fraud, and conspiracy to commit a felony. While responding to the charges, Mathew Burkaa, that's Emefiele's counsel, said he would need some time to study the new charge before his clients could enter a plea. And of course, joining me on the show right now to make sense of this is Dennis Osarenti, legal practitioner from Edo State. Thank you for your time, Dennis.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be with you this evening.
All right. I mean, interesting times again, you'd say, for Godwin Emefiele of Nigeria. Now, the amended charge borders on the criminal breach of trust, forgery, conspiracy to commit forgery, procurement fraud, just quite a number of things. Now, my question is, of these new charges, that have been put forward, about 20 of them, is there anything that is different from what is already in court?
Well, it's well within the remit or the discretion of the prosecution, in this instance, the FCC, to file charges, amend charges for as long as they want, because the law gives them that prerogative. But just like you have highlighted, I don't really see anything that is substantially different from what they have filed previously, So I'm very skeptical about these new charges. And I'm also very skeptical about their seriousness to really prosecute. I'm just hoping that this may not just end up as another whitewashing or a media trial that will just waste the time of Nigerians and then just be for the headlines and the page of newspaper, and nothing at the end of the day, nothing significant is achieved, during the course of this trial.
Now, you talked about in the course of a particular case, charges and amended charges can actually come up. But at some point, wouldn't you also say that maybe in this case, you might want to look at maybe something like maybe an abuse of power, for instance, where maybe they realize that the government through the FCC has realized, okay, just to keep this man in hold, let's keep trumping up charges, just to sort of elongate his stay in detention. I would like to know your take, and particularly what the law says concerning charges and, of course, amended charges. Is there a limit?
Yeah, by any stretch of imagination, all the counts or the allegations of the crime that have been brought against Emefiele, with good respect, they are all bailable offenses. There's nothing really significant, it's not really serious or life-threatening that warrant is continued detention, in custody, especially bearing in mind that, several courts in the land have, deem it necessary or deem it wise to admit him to bail. So since the courts have granted him bail, it is only proper for the FCC and the federal government in this instance to obey to work within the ambit of the rule of law. Anything other than that will, like you have rightly mentioned, be a play to the gallery, or to be a reign of impunity. And I'm hoping that this current EFCC, under the current chairman, have learned their lesson from the the lawless regime that we just emerged from. Prosecution is not persecution. So Emefiele is presumed innocent until he is found guilty by competent courts, of the land. As of today, Emefiele has every right to enjoy his liberty just like every other citizen, no matter the amount of charges that will be filed or amended to be filed against him. He is still presumed innocent until he is proven guilty or otherwise.
Now, some are also of the opinion that this case is having some sort of political undertone as against the factual reasons why it's being held up. Do you also share that line of thought?
Certainly, I wouldn't subscribe to that, because we all agree that under the past regime of President Muhammadu Buhari, there's a lot of impunity that went on in that regime. So if a government, in the government of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, now decide to open the record and begin to try some of these public officials that appears to have abused their office, I don't see anything political in that. But my only quarrel is that they should ensure that they have they put their house in order. They have concluded their thorough investigation even before filing a charge. So these scenarios of filing one charge today and amending it tomorrow, keep refiling and filing, it has become very embarrassing, because I thought by now they already have their records, they've already done their investigation, and what is left now is for Emefiele to face his trial. But this consistent amendment or an attempt to abuse court process, for me, it leaves so much to be desired.
I'm going through some of the new charges right now. I want to read one of the counts to you, and I would like to know your legal angle to this. Now, count 1 of the charge reads conferring corrupt advantage contrary to Section 19 of the Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Act of 2000. Now, this particular, or the particulars of the offences are that that's what the count says, Godwin Emefiele, male, adult, sometime in 2019, did use your position as governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria to confer a corrupt advantage to a particular client or candidate, by the name of Yaro, a staff of the Central Bank of Nigeria, by awarding a contract for the supply of 37 numbers of Toyota Hilux vehicles at the cost of I'm saying about, this is about 800 million naira or more on April. Now, it goes on and on and on. So, I mean, I'm looking at some of these things because, I mean, there are quite a number of them. And then you ask yourself, what exactly, when it comes to corrupt or using your position as an advantage, sometimes that line gets really, really thin, right? I just want to know what the law says, particularly when it comes to drawing boundaries in terms of, okay, I did not use it to enrich myself, but at the same time, I did follow due process. So why should I be held, why should I be victimized? I don't know if you get what I mean.
Yeah, totally understand where you're coming from.
So what is the stand of the law on this?
Yeah, in Nigeria, there are a lot of things that public officials or officers do that may look culturally right, in the eyes of our customs and convention. But in the eyes of the law, only in the light of our procurement laws or our anti-corruption or corrupt practices laws, some of these things amount to corrupt practices. For example, conferring undue advantage on somebody that is related to you without passing due process of procurement. That in itself is a corrupt practice. So, it matters not what your intentions were. If you award contract to somebody without following due process as prescribed by law, that may amount to, a corrupt practice. That is without prejudice to what is, there before the court for trial. Like we have said, all these counts, all these, charges are still mere allegations. The onus rests squarely on the federal government through the FCC to prove in court. Until they provide sufficient evidence in court, we may not be in a position to say Emefiele is guilty or not guilty. So all we are saying is that we hope that the FCC, they've done their homework, they have concluded their investigations, and they have all their facts in check to prosecute Emefiele. But we will not condone a situation whereby Emefiele will be brought to court, he will be left in court, and then this regime will come and go, and Emefiele will not have a day in court. We hope that Emefiele will have a day in court, and they will try and based on the available facts and figures, so that we can have this case over and done with in no record time, so that it can serve as a deterrent to other CBN governors who think that because they occupy the office of a CBN governor, they are a law or a law unto themselves. They must know that the position of the CBN governor is a position that is created by law, and all your functions and responsibilities are as prescribed by law. If you act outside that remit, you will be held accountable like Emefiele is currently undergoing right now.
Now, I mean, from your own legal perspective, how do you see this entire process eventually panning out?
Yeah, for me, like I said, I'm hoping that yes, they've done their homework, they have concluded their investigations thoroughly, and they have all the facts, the witnesses, the exhibits to really prosecute Emefiele to the letter. And I'm standing right here. I'm opposed to persecution. I don't want to show whereby people start thinking that probably because Emefiele is from a particular region, or because he disagreed politically with some certain powers that be, that's the reason why he's undergoing this travail. I'm sincerely hoping that they have some incriminating evidence against Emefiele. That's why they have charged him to court. And I'm hoping that indeed at the end of the day, Emefiele will find justice, will have his day in court, and whatever happens will serve as a proper precedent to guide any other person that may become the CBN governor in the nearest future. Because the CBN as an institution is very pivotal to the stability of our economy. We cannot afford to have a politician, becoming the CBN governor and begin to use the office for his own personal interest or self-aggrandizement. That would plunge the economy into serious crisis that we currently have. But we are hoping that EFCC would ensure that they prosecute their case diligently and they don't leave any loopholes for Emefiele to escape justice.
Now, let's broaden this conversation a bit. Let's look at accountability in public office, right? We understand and we've seen, of course, in recent times where the previous administration, of course, we understand that the mantra was, fighting corruption, but recent revelations have actually revealed that certain members of the former cabinet, were hugely corrupt. And then it brings to the fore the issue of accountability. I want to believe that before a minister, approves or certain monies come out, there needs to be a process, some level of approvals. But it seems like all of that is skipped, and then you hear huge amounts coming out. Now, my question to you is this: why is it that there's so much effrontery when it comes to these funds, coming out of public coffers? Is it that there is lax in the institution or the institutions of law, or the fact that there are some people that are just more powerful than the laws of the land, deemed powerful than the laws of the land? Okay, I think we lost connection there with Dennis.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, did you get my question?
Hello?
Did you get my question?
No, please, can you repeat that?
Okay, so my question to you is this. Let's talk about accountability in public office in Nigeria. How would you rate it?
It's obvious that our public officers, clearly once they get into power, it gets into their head and they begin to, do whatever they like without due recourse to the rule of law and setting global best practices. But I don't want to conclude that they were corrupt persons in the past.
Dennis, if you can hear me, please, we will need you to unmute your device. We are not able to hear you.
Hello?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please go ahead. Dennis, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me now, please?
Yes, very well.
Yes, I said I would agree with you that there was a level of profligacy. There was a high level of impunity, in the last government. But until a court of law, a court of competent jurisdiction pronounces them guilty of corruption, I will not be here to pass judgment on anybody from that past, regime. But I'm yet to see any form of seriousness in terms of, a change of attitude in this current government to really fight or tackle corruption headlong. But I'm happy with the level of, reform that is going on right now. We have seen instances where a minister has been suspended and they've opened up investigation into our activities in office. That should be encouraged. But until a court of law finds this person guilty, we may not be in a position to say they were corrupt or they were not corrupt. But it is an open secret that public officers in Nigeria, once they get into office, their main intendment is to go and line their pockets and enrich themselves. And that is a very bad precedent that they are setting, for their followership. But I'm hoping that this current government would take this fight against corruption very seriously, and they must be willing to show example. They must lead from the front, like they have already done with the current minister. They will conclude the investigation in no time, and those who have been found wanting will be prosecuted, and they will have their day in court.
Okay, Dennis, that of course will lead me to my next question, which is, do you think that this fight against corruption is somewhat selective? What do I mean? Right now, we know that the likes of Emefiele, of course, is in the dragnet of the law concerning abuse of office and all. But some would also tell you that it would not have acted alone, right? For him to have allowed, or some things to have, happened, it got a pass from maybe some higher authority, maybe like the president, for instance. And right now, it looks like, the former president, has not been invited for questioning in any of the cases. Let's take a typical example, the redesigning of the Naira notes. We know that it could not solely have made that decision himself, even though at the end of the day, Nigerians had to pay dearly for it. But it's just Emefiele right now in the eye of the storm. And people are asking, what about, his superior, his boss then? So do you think that this fight is hypocritical and pretty much selective?
Yes, I would agree with you on that score that the fight appears to be selective, and it appears to be more of a political vendetta than real or a serious fight against corruption, or to clear the audience stable. So I would have expected that probably a holistic probe would have been conducted to have a proper audit of what transpired in the last administration, so that we know exactly where we are as a country in some level of sleaze or corrupt practices, as the case may be. But it appears all hell has been let loose simply because of a political stance or a political point of view that Emefiele expressed during the last election, and his level of involvement. Like I said, Emefiele is a public official and his functions are well defined by law. So if Emefiele, in his capacity as CBN governor, didn't advise himself to act within the remit of the law that appointed him, he has himself to blame. So at best, he has some level of discretion, and as a CBN governor, there was any decision that he could have been solely responsible in taking. And for example, the issues of monetary policies and fiscal policy. So those issues cannot necessarily be left to the position alone. These were decisions that were left to him to take as a CBN governor, of course, in conjunction with the member of his board. But whether or not the fight is selective, I would agree with you to an extent like it's selective, because Emefiele was not the only person that served in that last government. Emefiele was not the only person that appears to have been fingered in the one-term looting that happened in the last administration. So we hope that many more ministers will be invited and investigated, and they will all have their day in court if they are found wanting.
All right, we need to go on a quick break. When we return, of course, there is still more to talk about. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is still the conversation, and of course we are looking at matters arising concerning the former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, where the federal government has, of course, amended its charges against him to about 20 counts. And of course, the former governor has indeed responded that they need time to study these new charges and, of course, move forward. Now, to make sense of this, we still have with us Dennis, who, of course, is a legal practitioner. Thank you for hanging on, Dennis. All right, Dennis, my next question is around the civil service itself. Most of the time, when this fight or this cleanup is being done, especially when it comes to, ensuring that corruption is nipped in the bud in public service, the government, or will I say the institutions right now responsible for this, tend to leave out career civil servants. And some will tell you that quite a number of them are actually even more corrupt. Some of them are more corrupt than even politicians, right? So I just want to know your take as regards this fight, against corruption, and particularly as it affects career civil servants. Why is it that in some sectors, we've seen cases where the few that have come out to the public, and then you wonder, how can a permanent secretary, how can a director in a particular ministry have so much access to money, or have so much money in his private possession, even as a career civil servant? Would you say that this particular beam, this searchlight, is going, in terms of dealing with it, addressing it from the root cause?
Yes, the issue of corruption, or the instances of corruption in Nigeria, it will be likened to the biblical idiom of he who is that sin to be the first to cast a stone, because it's a web, it's a network of individuals who are involved in this corruption. Because for this this wanton amount of looting to have taken place, you agree with me that it will be a collaboration of different MDA, different agents, different personnel, different officers, in different cadres that have they have one role or the other to play. And because of the one-time resources that is available for them to corner to themselves, they all unite to milk this country dry. They are all in unison. Usually the reason why we get to hear some of all these leaks at the end of the day is probably because some persons were not carried along. Like what happened in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. It was obvious that because the minister, or the suspended minister probably blew a whistle on a particular, head of an agency. And that was when we now had probably a retaliation. People also exposed what she was also, involved in. So if peradventure the minister had looked the other way, probably, I'm just saying, hazarding a guess, we may never have heard of what she was also, alleged to have been involved in. So there's usually a collaboration between the career civil servants who probably were even in the system, and they have lived there long enough to know how to manipulate the system, and they may end up even training or teaching these politicians how these things are done. So in embarking on a very holistic fight against corruption, the civil servants who were also involved, who were also indicted, should not be left out of this fight. If any of them are found to have been involved, for example, under the past regime, we heard of this institution whereby the Accountant General of the Federation, was said to have, cornered, some billions into his own personal account. So there is no way these persons can successfully loot our treasury, loot our resources without the active connivance of the civil servant. So in embarking on this fight, the civil service must also be looked into. There must be a serious reform in the way and manner the civil service, run. And if any of them is found wanting, they should all have their day in court.
All right, Dennis, thank you so much for your contribution on the program today. Dennis Osarinti, legal practitioner from Edo State. Once again, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, at this point, we'll go on a quick break. When we return, this time we will be going to Rwanda. Stay with us. This is still the conversation. Let's switch gears to Rwanda, where the UK has paid £240 million to Rwanda, with a further 50 million pounds to come. Now, so far, no asylum seekers have been sent to the country. Asked on why he was taking the money, now, the president of Rwanda, that's Mr. Kagame, said it's only going to be used if those people will come. If they don't come, we can return that money. And of course, this is what has spiked conversations across the world. But Rwanda's government later specified there was no obligation to do so. Now, joining me to make sense of this is Collins Mweke, a global affairs analyst, is joining from Belgium. Thank you so much for your time, Collins.
Thank you, Dakwa. Always a pleasure to be with you.
All right, great. Now, for clarity purpose, now, what does this particular scheme, entail?
Well, it's a funny one. I mean, you rightly quoted the president of Rwanda when he said, we can. So which means that there is no obligation on their part to return the money already paid to them if no asylum seekers actually come in. So essentially, one word for it in Nigeria's balance is 419. That's essentially what Rwanda appears to have, played on the UK here. But well, it remains to be seen how it all plays out. The House of Lords in the UK still has to, take a ruling on this. The lower house, which is the House of Commons, the equivalent of House of Representatives in Nigeria, has, supported it barely. And so let's see how the House of Lords react.
I mean, it's an interesting one, because looking at the idea behind the scheme or the program itself, talking about asylum seekers being deported to Rwanda, and then the government of the UK paying certain amounts of money, should they, be sent to that country for their upkeep. One would ask, what exactly, what is the objective of this scheme? And to what end? What is the United Kingdom trying to achieve? And why is Rwanda the point of choice?
Well, Rwanda is a point of choice because Rwanda sees some money in it, and Rwanda is interested in the money that is coming out of it.
But Rwanda is saying they don't mind sending back the money, meaning that they might not really be interested in the funds. So what's in it for Rwanda, really?
They said they are not interested in the money. They said, and then he said further that we can return the money, and then went further to provide some further clarification that they are not under obligations to return the money. So what it means is that the money might never be returned. But in any case, for Rwanda, the motivation is money. Number two, Rwanda also wants to be seen as being in the league of democratic, caring nations of the world, one that happens to be positioned in Africa. So in a way, they have kind of calculated that this is one of the ways that Rwanda could be seen internationally as one of those countries that cares for human rights, as one of those countries that care for vulnerable people. Whereas the reality in Rwanda itself speaks completely the opposite of that, because we know that government is very hostile to refugees coming from neighboring countries of Africa. They don't treat them well. Police is known to beat up asylum seekers in Rwanda. Now, coming to the side of the UK, it is very simple. They want to the UK wants to simply act tough in keeping with the disaster that they called Brexit when they exited, the EU because of asylum matters, no matter whatever reasons that they gave. So in keeping with that, they want to, prove to the British people that they are reducing the number of asylum seekers, even when it is staring them in the face that that is not the case. That this is completely too expensive, it is ineffective, and it is not in keeping with the British established, credential of caring for the vulnerable. Yet they are pressing ahead.
All right. Of course, joining us on this conversation is Tams Zhao, African Affairs Analyst from London. Thank you for joining in, Tams.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Such an important topic and an interesting conversation you've had.
All right. Collins has tried to establish some sort of foundation as to the objective or the motive why this scheme is up, and of course what the UK and also Rwanda stands to gain. But I'd like to know your opinion. Number one, on the program, that's the scheme concerning, refugees from the UK to Rwanda, and also the fact that the Rwandan government has said, look, should the need be, we don't mind returning the money given to us by the UK, even though we are not, obligated to do so. So I'd like to know your take on it, Tams.
So probably the first thing to do is to simplify it. In general, Western countries are becoming, you have to go back to 1926, that time before the Second World War, to realize that a lot of the people who vote are becoming anti-immigrant. So the UK government is part of that. Immigration is a big issue in the election, just like it would be in America and what we saw in the Netherlands. So those that want to win the elections, especially the Conservative Party in the UK, are saying that they need to show the electorate that they have a plan in place to reduce the level of immigration. They know that the number of people who are going to go to Rwanda is very small, probably maybe under 200 a year, when they are getting tens of thousands, and they've got 150,000 people waiting to have their asylum claims processed. So they know that this scheme is not going to do very much, but it is important as a political message for them to take into the next election. That's how you have to read it. Nothing more, nothing less.
Now, let's look at, of course, the political and also legal implication of this particular program for both countries. I'm staying with you, Tams. What's your take?
So I think the first one is, let's look at the implications on Rwanda. So Rwanda is, I'm just trying to improve my lighting, I think. So Rwanda is a country that wants to prove to the world that it is safe for refugees, it is doing a good thing, it is going beyond the lessons of the genocide in 1994. And then the issue for them is that they don't want the international law to be broken and them to be party to that, which is why they are emphasizing that the United Kingdom must make sure that there is no law, international law, or the UN conventions or the Geneva conventions that are broken or undermined in the process of doing this particular thing. But when it comes to the UK itself, it goes back to the days of Brexit, where there are some in the Conservative Party in particular who want to argue that the sovereignty of the UK must be seen by making sure that there is no court of law outside the jurisdiction of the United Kingdom that can override or be the last court of appeal on the issues. So in this case, they're talking about the European Convention of Human Rights, which is separate from the EU process. People, they need to understand that there's the EU Commission and then the European Union that the United Kingdom is no longer part of. The European Court of Human Rights is like the African Court of Human Rights within the conventions. There are always, these courts that are beyond your jurisdiction. So that is the main issue. It is unlikely to work. It is unlikely to reduce the number of people that will come through the channel from France, but they want to try and argue that at least that won't happen.
Now, we know that the issue of refugee migration has become an international talking point. Countries, as much as willing to help, quite a number of them too are also skeptical, particularly for fear of security, and also the fact that there will be extra pressure on their resources. So we've seen cases where, for political reasons, some governments have had to make anti-refugee policies and laws. Now, I'm going back to you, Collins. What do you consider a solution to, of course, solve the world refugee crisis that we see in certain parts of the world? Collins.
Am I being heard?
Okay, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
You can. Okay. Like my colleague alluded to, there is a very clear intention here all around the Western Hemisphere to politicize, migration. And so they become an easy target. And what you have seen, the outcome of that is that, far-right political elements, even from the opposition, are actually helping to remodel the, migration policy to harden it because, some challenges, some economic challenges. And so the easiest victims to, point accusing fingers on for the woes that are happening in the, Western countries are the migrants. And so that is one of the elements that is actually pushing the anti-migration, drive that we see across the entire Europe. Netherlands started it. Recently, far-right party won in the Netherlands. Belgium is having its own party later in the year. And so what is happening in the UK is not different from that. And so you are set to actually see more of those anti-migration, policies. And so even the ruling parties, those on the left of the political spectrum that are actually meant to be more progressive, more supportive of migration and all of that, are being even more careful to the point that they actually allow public opinion to mold their policies. And so it is the population that leads them rather than them leading as, politicians in shaping, policies, shaping the, the opinions of people. Now, as long as the economy is in shambles, people will continue to, play into that and make vulnerable people actually pay the price. But there are, very courageous, political figures that are standing up to it and actually helping to retell the narrative. And I believe that that is the way to go. Although the cost can be expensive in terms of, costing them their political jobs.
All right, I'd like to go back to you, Thams, on this one. In terms of, do you think the rights of these migrants also are taken into consideration, for instance, while making some of these decisions? I mean, a migrant who sort of found his way to the UK, and right now the government is saying, you know what, I want to send you to Rwanda, I'll take you back to Rwanda. And you would also want to say, as much as, yes, it might be a migrant, he also has laws, he has rights. Are these rights taken into cognizance when some of these policies are made?
It would look like the people that, if you listen to the members of parliament in the Tory party to the right of that party who are saying this deal is not good enough, this law is not good enough, it would appear that we are now at that stage where it doesn't really matter what the rights of those individuals are, because they are saying that they want to use Rwanda as a processing center. In other words, as soon as you get to the UK via some dingy or boat, they want to take you to Rwanda and have your asylum claim processed over there. And then if you succeed or something happens, there are only a few who are excluded, who will then be able to be taken back. So I would like to think that they want to get away with everything that they can. without necessarily looking at the rights, because there is a political belief that a lot of these people that are crossing are not genuine refugees, but people who are, going for economic reasons rather than anything. So it's very difficult to put the rights of those individuals in this case, which is what a lot of charities, NGOs, campaign groups, or those in the opposition have been arguing. So I think we are past that, and that is what the court and the Supreme Court even, that's what influenced their decision. And what you find in this law that, or this bill that the UK is pushing, it actually says or makes a declaration that Rwanda is a safe place. But remember, Rwanda is doing part of this because it has joined the Commonwealth, moving away from the Francophone, countries. So there's a link there. But I think resources-wise, human rights-wise, whatever you might want to push, things can change very, very, very quickly. Look at Ukraine. Look at other countries. It might well be that those people that go to Rwanda might end up. It might end up being a blessing in disguise, because their opportunities could be better there, their rights could be better protected there, and they could be a turnaround. Those that remain in the UK might have a tougher time to assert their own rights, even if they are given permission to stay.
I mean, I'm still going to stay with you on this particular issue because, I mean, when you look at it, apart from many of these refugees or many of these migrants move, or change countries, move around for either security or economic reasons, like you have rightly pointed. Now, for someone who, for the sake of their safety, should choose to leave their country, their home country, for another country, I think when it comes to international law, the right to life is really important. So wouldn't you also say that when the government does some of these things without carrying the people's rights along, it's a breach of, some of these fundamental rights, which brings me back to the question as to how does the judiciary the role of the judiciary, how does it come to play in all of this? I'd like to, of course, hear your opinion on this, Collins.
Well, the judiciary hasn't got any role to play until the matter has been, assessed and played out in the political arena, because that's where the laws are made, that's where the bills are drafted and then passed or rejected. Now, it is only when it comes on appeal, that's where the court comes in, and that is where they wield the very strong power that they have. We have seen that happen in the UK, where, the Supreme Court ruled that, the bill is not tenable and that the repatriation should be stopped. So it depends, because even in the court, of course, you do have those to the left and those to the right. So it depends on, who is actually sitting on the saddle. But all in all, I believe that the courts have shown courage. They have actually taken very strongly into consideration what the British spirit is. The political side of it has not so much as interested them. So ultimately, yes, the court will be the decider of which side it will go. But from what we have seen, the desperation amongst the political class, particularly the Tories in this case, is so huge that they are ready to do anything and everything to see that they keep representing, this bill until it passes. But it remains wait and see.
All right. Just before I let you go, I'd like to know your take on should the UK decide not to send, migrants. Do you ever see Rwanda returning that money? Just briefly. I'd like to start off with you, Thames.
Yes, President Paul Kagame was very clear when he was in Davos that they will return the money. He doesn't need the money. He's just doing this to be able to put Rwanda on a higher level diplomatically, and also to say that he is making a contribution to what the United Nations Human Rights Commission asked them to do, to take in as many refugees as possible. To UK, that won't make a difference. I don't think this scheme is going to work. And after the elections, I think we are going to see another bill being put through by whoever is going to be in government at that time.
All right. What about you, Collins? Do you think Rwanda will return the money?
I will believe that Rwanda will return the money when they actually return the money. I doubt, because nothing stopped Kagame from saying we will return the money. What he said, and I listened very carefully, is that we can return the money. But he also reminded us that they are not under obligation to do so. Don't forget that some buildings have been renovated, so expenses are already been made as a consequence of this deal. So in the end, they might just write everything off and say, well, look at where we have spent the money on. So I don't believe a word of it. The money may not come back.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Special thanks. Collins Mweke, Global Affairs Analyst, and Thames Zhao, African Affairs Analyst from London, Belgium. Thank you once again, gentlemen.
Always a pleasure. Cheers.
All right, and that's a wrap on the show today. Of course, we'd like to also state that the opinions and views of our guests remains theirs and not that of News Central. My name is Dakbo Adigboye. Bye for now.